These 4 kittens were left behind by their owner right at the entrance of a building. The first few days on their own were rough, and then something unexpected happened that completely changed how they stuck together. On a quiet corner of Maple Street, 4 tiny kittens, Whiskers, Mittens, Luna, and Tiger, were playing near the doorway they'd started calling home. That's when their owner came outside carrying a cardboard box. Without saying a word, he set it down a few steps from the door and walked away like it meant nothing. The kittens, excited to see the man they trusted and hearing the familiar sound of food rustling in the box, ran straight to it. Sure enough, it was filled with milk and some cat food. They ate happily and spent the rest of the day playing nearby, not realizing this might be their last meal from him. The next day, they waited by the entrance, hoping Mr. Johnson would come back with more food in the same box. But as the sun set, the cold air crept in, and their little stomachs growled from hunger. No one came. They stayed out there all day, cold, tired, and hungry. By the following morning, it slowly became clear. He wasn't coming back. The kittens were alone. Unsure what to do, they wandered toward the doors of the building, hoping someone inside might help. They pressed their small noses against the cold metal and meowed softly, hoping someone would hear them. But people walked by without even looking down. The tiny cries were lost in the noise of the hallway. No one stopped. No one noticed. Days blurred into nights, and the kittens ended up curled on a bench nearby. A few strangers would toss scraps their way now and then, but not enough to keep them warm or fed. Most people just walked past, caught up in their own busy lives. Still, the kittens kept hoping that Mr. Johnson would return and take them back inside. What they didn't know was that their owner had moved on without a second thought. He saw them as too small, too odd-looking to be worth keeping or selling. To him, they just weren't worth the effort. The doorway they once knew as home now felt like a cold reminder of how quickly things had changed. Every morning the kittens would watch Mr. Johnson come and go, his boots echoing down the walkway. He didn't even glance at them. The 4 kittens stayed close together, quietly hoping he might see them. But he never did. Their tiny meows grew weaker each day, lost in the sounds of traffic and the door slamming behind him. Weeks passed. Life on the street wore them down. Their once clean fur was now dusty and tangled. They tried to explore, hoping to find food or safety, but everything around them felt unfamiliar and harsh. They were still just babies, trying to survive a world that felt far too big. The kittens had to figure out how to survive on the streets. They started sleeping under the bench and sniffing around for leftover crumbs in the corners. On some days, they'd get a little lucky. Mrs. Rodriguez, a gentlewoman with a soft spot for animals, would sometimes leave them a small saucer of milk, and Mr. Thompson, an older man who walked with a cane, would toss a handful of kibbles toward them when he passed by. But these kind gestures, as kind as they were, didn't happen often enough. They were tiny sparks of hope in a day full of hunger and waiting. Still, what hurt most wasn't just the hunger. It was how people barely seemed to care. The kittens craved warmth, a kind hand, a safe place to belong, and just when it seemed life couldn't get much harder, it did. Some of the building's residents began complaining. They didn't want the kittens around anymore. A few were even angry, saying the little cats were dirty, wild, and too clingy when they tried to get close. Mrs. Rodriguez and Mr. Thompson tried to speak up for the kittens. They defended them, hoping to calm the rising frustration from the others, but their voices weren't loud enough to drown out the complaints. The pressure grew. That's when someone new stepped in, a woman named Mrs. Harper. She was kind, with a warm smile and a calm way about her. She'd noticed the kittens during her walks, always huddled together near the entrance, eyes wide with both fear and hope. Over time, she started checking on them more and more, and her worry grew. The busy road nearby made her nervous. She had seen how close the kittens came to danger without even realizing it. They'd play too close to the street, chasing each other or random bits of trash, unaware of how fast and unforgiving cars could be. Mrs. Harper couldn't just walk by anymore. The thought of one of the kittens being hit by a car haunted her. That fear pushed her to act. She decided she had to do something, anything, to keep them safe. She started contacting local animal shelters and reaching out to rescue groups. She searched online, called around, even looked for volunteers who might be able to help. It wasn't easy. Some places were full, others didn't respond, and not everyone cared. But Mrs. Harper didn't give up. She sent emails, made phone calls, and went to local meetings to tell people about the kittens. Slowly, a few folks in the neighborhood began to pay attention. Some even started to wonder if they'd been wrong to ignore them for so long. But just as things were starting to shift, something terrible happened. Tiger, the smallest and boldest of the bunch, had wandered off like he usually did, poking around for something to eat. While chasing a quick little rat, he ended up far from the bench and the others. Lost and hungry, his nose picked up the smell of cooked fish coming from a nearby building. Drawn in by the scent, his empty belly urged him forward. He found the source, a man sitting by a doorway, eating a hot meal. Tiger crept closer and gave a soft meow, eyes full of hope, silently asking for just a tiny bite. To Tiger's heartbreak, the man wasn't kind at all. Instead of sharing a bite, he waved the kitten away, and when Tiger didn't give up, the man struck him hard. The little kitten stumbled back, hurt and stunned from the blow. But even through the pain, Tiger gathered what strength he had and started the long, hard walk back to the only place that felt like home. Every step hurt, but he kept going. By the time Tiger made it back to the others, he was barely able to move. His tiny body trembled, but the others didn't notice just how bad things were. That night, while the world around them slept, Tiger quietly fought through the pain, curled up beside his siblings. He didn't make a sound. As the sun rose, the streets came alive, but no one knew what had happened. It wasn't until Mrs. Harper stopped by, like she always did, that the truth came to light. There, near the entrance, she found Tiger's small, still body. She dropped to her knees, gently picking him up. Tears fell freely as she held him close, her heart breaking for the little kitten who had suffered in silence. In that quiet, painful moment, Mrs. Harper made a promise, to Tiger and to herself. She was going to fight harder for the others. She wasn't going to let this happen again. Soon after, she brought the 3 surviving kittens, Whiskers, Mittens, and Luna, to her parents' home. It was just a temporary stop, but it was warm, safe, and quiet. Inside, everything felt different. The house was filled with familiar smells and soft places to rest. Her parents welcomed the kittens without hesitation, giving them a gentle place to heal. Now, fed and clean, the kittens curled up in a cozy corner of Mrs. Harper's old bedroom. They slept deeply for the first time in days. The worst was behind them. As she sat beside them, watching them rest, Mrs. Harper finally let herself breathe. The pain of what they'd been through still lingered, but she knew she was doing something that mattered. Tiger's memory stayed with her. His loss had left a mark, but it had also lit a fire in her. She didn't stop at just giving them shelter. Mrs. Harper reached out to every animal welfare group she could find. She made phone calls, sent emails, and poured her heart out in every conversation. She told them everything about the danger these kittens had faced, about how close they'd come to more loss. One of those messages reached Sarah, a kind-hearted volunteer with a group called Paws of Love. When she heard Mrs. Harper's voice, full of emotion and urgency, she didn't hesitate. Sarah offered to help right away. Paws of Love was known for taking in animals with nowhere else to go. With Sarah on board, hope finally felt real. She promised they'd take in Whiskers, Mittens, and Luna and give them the care they so badly needed. Mrs. Harper felt her eyes fill with tears again, this time not from sorrow, but from relief. When the volunteers arrived and promised to care for the kittens like family, she knew they were finally safe. The ride to Paws of Love was filled with quiet emotions. Mrs. Harper gently carried the kittens in a small makeshift carrier, their little faces peeking out with a mix of curiosity and nervousness. When they arrived, the volunteers welcomed them with warmth and calm voices, such a contrast from everything the kittens had known on the street. The cozy space at Paws of Love was about to become their safe spot, a place where Whiskers, Mittens, and Luna could finally start to heal while waiting for a real home. The volunteers moved with care, laying out soft blankets, placing toys nearby, and softly speaking to the kittens. Slowly, the once scared trio began to explore, their tiny paws taking cautious steps across the floor. It was a quiet, powerful moment, leaving behind fear for the first signs of comfort. Mrs. Harper stood by and watched, her heart full as she saw the shift begin right in front of her eyes. That first change was just the start. Soon after settling in, it was time for the next big step: foster placement. The volunteers at Paws of Love had already arranged everything. They made sure the kittens would be introduced to people who were open to giving them a loving, permanent home. Every detail had been thought through with care. When the day came, Mrs. Harper stayed close as the kittens were gently carried into a bright room where a few potential adopters waited. Her heart raced with both hope and worry. All her efforts had led to this moment. As the carriers opened, the kittens stepped out slowly. Whiskers, always the bravest, wandered toward a couple sitting quietly in the corner. Luna stuck close to Mittens, her wide eyes scanning the room, unsure but curious. Mittens stayed alert, calmly observing everything. The room was filled with quiet conversation. People were interested, but cautious. The kittens' past made them hesitate. Would the little ones be okay in a new home? Could they trust humans again? From the back of the room, Mrs. Harper watched and waited. Everything hung in the air. Weeks of worry, sleepless nights, and small victories. She could only hope that someone would truly see the sweet, gentle hearts behind those timid eyes. That's when the volunteers stepped in again. They spoke kindly, sharing details about each kitten, how Whiskers loved to explore, how Luna was quiet but playful when she felt safe, and how Mittens had slowly come out of her shell. The more they talked, the more the mood began to shift. The adopters started to smile. They crouched down, reached out gently, and met the kittens at their pace. Little by little, hesitation turned to connection. And as Whiskers climbed into one person's lap and Luna purred softly beside her sister, something beautiful began to take shape. The walls of doubt slowly fell away, replaced by something softer, genuine affection. You could feel the warmth in the room as Whiskers settled into the lap of the very family that had been unsure at first. Smiles spread across their faces as they welcomed him into their lives without hesitation. Luna, too, found someone who looked past her timid nature and saw her gentle spirit. And Mittens, once so quiet and cautious, caught the heart of a kind soul who had a soft spot for those who'd been through tough times. Mrs. Harper stood nearby, filled with gratitude. She watched as each kitten was met with patience, warmth, and open arms. The volunteers from Paws of Love had helped make this possible, giving the adopters a chance to truly understand who these kittens were beneath the surface. Even though the kittens had been through so much, they still found a way to trust again. Slowly, they began to relax in their new homes. The strength that had helped them survive the cold streets now helped them settle into their new lives, lives filled with soft beds, gentle hands, and warm hearts. They were no longer the tiny, shivering kittens huddled under a bench. Whiskers and Luna were now cherished family members, loved for who they were. Mittens, once the quiet one, now had a home where he was seen and treasured. This story started with 4 kittens left behind without a second thought. But thanks to Mrs. Harper, the team at Paws of Love, and the kind people who chose to open their hearts, it ended in the best way possible. Whiskers, Mittens, and Luna found what they had always longed for: safety, comfort, and love. Love really can change everything. Would you have done what Mrs. Harper did if you'd found 4 helpless kittens left out in the cold? And could you open your heart to an animal with a rough start? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. There are so many animals out there who just need a chance. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.
If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with someone who may find it interesting. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.